altruistic followers and fans. How are you, good-hearted fellas? It's ideally a thrilling process yesterday with absolute delight. Back for my 54th video in pipeline for publication on YouTube today, 1st of August 2020. Topic today is population explosion in materialistic society. Population explosion is a name which has been given to the fact that mankind keeps growing fast. It's now 8 billion and the resources to feed and supply them all do not grow as fast as the population does. The resources are in fact limited. More people cause more environmental destruction, what even reduces the resources. It is really explosion and not growth, since the increase in population follows an exponential distribution. God, the superpower, created everything that was perfectly balanced. He or she made the grave mistake of creating a species called human being, which is damn good in destroying ecological balance and contaminating nature to the worst possible extent. Besides, these species created religions, etc. for their own benefit. God created all human beings equal in all aspects. We, the earthlings, have ruined everything, and of course we are facing the dire consequences. In spite of that, we never seem to change. It has gone from bad to worse. So ultimately we'll face mass extinction, and it has already started happening. Human beings are the only creatures to exhibit the vicious quality of greediness, committing premeditated sins. Except human beings, all other sentient species are trustworthy. Satans, also known as evil demons, exist in the form of human beings all over this planet Earth. Human overpopulation or population overshoot is that when there are too many people for the environment to sustain. In more scientific terms, there is overshoot when the ecological footprint of a human population in a geographical area exceeds that place carrying capacity, damaging the environment faster than it can be repaired by nature, potentially leading to an ecological and social collapse. Overpopulation can result an increase in births, a decline in mortality rates, an increase in immigration, or an unsustainable biome and depletion of resources. Issues like exceeding the Earth's carrying capacity also exist. Global warming potential or imminent ecological collapse, impact on quality of life, and risk of mass starvation or even extinction. That's what I said as a basis to argue for population decline. Paul Ehrlich said, it's a situation where a population is in the process of depleting non-renewable resources. Changes in lifestyle could cause an overpopulated area to no longer be overpopulated without any reduction in population, or vice versa. The population is expected to reach between 8 and 10.5 billion between the years 2040 and 2050. In 2017, UN created the medium variant projections to 9.8 billion for 2050 and 11.2 billion for 2100. Critical factor is that the population is not just growing, but that the growth ratio reached its peak and the total population is now growing much slower. By 2030, over 2/3 of the world population will be living in countries with fertility below the replacement level, and for total world population to stabilize between 10 to 12 billion people by year 2100. The rapid increase in world population over the past 3 centuries has raised concerns among some people that the planet may not be able to sustain the future or even present number of its inhabitants. The Inter-Academic Panel Statement of Population Growth Circa to the 1994 stated that many environmental problems such as rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide, global warming, pollution are aggravated by the population explosion. Other problems are the increased demand for resources such as fresh water and food, starvation and malnutrition, consumption of natural resources faster than the rate of regeneration and deterioration in living conditions. Many believe that waste and overconsumption, especially by wealthy nations, is putting more strain on the environment than overpopulation itself. World population has been rising continuously since the end of the Black Death around the year 1350, although the most significant increase has been since the 1950s, mainly due to medical advancements and increases in agricultural productivity. Population density varies quite significantly. In countries like USA, Australia, Canada and China, population density is very low, whereas in countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, population density is way too high. Resources are becoming scarce as days progress, and cost of living is shooting through the roof. People living in rich countries where the per capita income is high can bear this brunt. How about people living in poor countries like India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Nigeria, Somalia? So many children are suffering from malnutrition and stunted growth. Infant mortality rate is very high in such countries. One needs to have the requisite amount of money to fulfill the basic needs of any human being like food, shelter and clothing besides healthcare. Public health schemes are lacking in such countries. Natural calamities are also on the rise. There is a proliferation of lifestyle diseases. All of us are forced to spend on so much money through our nose, even for bad necessities of life like potable water, pure air for breathing. Environmental degradation is rapid and all of us are facing the consequences like global warming, pollution and chemical hazards. The global number of famine-related deaths has declined and food supply per person has increased with the population growth. You know about greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity loss. After the start of the Industrial Revolution during the 18th century, the rate of population growth began to increase. And by the end of the century, the world's population was estimated at just fewer than 1 billion. At the turn of the 20th century, the world's population was roughly 1.6 billion. By 1940, this figure increased to 2.3 billion. Each subsequent addition of a billion humans took less and less time. 33 years to reach 3 billion in 1960, 14 years to 4 billion in 1974, 13 years for 5 billion in 1987, and 12 years for 6 billion in 1999. Dramatic growth beginning in 1950, about 1.8% per year, coincided with greatly increased food production as a result of the industrialization of agriculture brought about by the Green Revolution. The rate of human population growth peaked in 1964 at about 2.1% per year. In India, the population grew from 361.1 million people in 1951 to just over 1.2 billion by 2011, a 235% increase in 60 years. According to UN data, there are an average 250 babies born each minute are more than 130 million a year. UN data from 2019 shows that the human population grows by 100 million every 14 months. From a historical perspective, technological revolutions have coincided with the population expansion. There have been three major technical revolutions: the tool-making revolution, the agricultural revolution, and the industrial revolution, all of which allowed humans more access to food, resulting in subsequent population explosions. There is imbalance between population increase and the increase in food production or food productivity. To the population, people living in poor countries are more fertile than people living in developed countries, rich countries. China managed to contain the population explosion by certain measures by the government, like disincentives for families with more than 2 children, euthanasia, of people with chronic ailments for which there is no permanent cure. Why not other countries, especially poor countries, emulate such practices which would be good for the country in the long run? Maybe sterilize a couple with 2 children compulsorily. Donald R. Meadows argued a correlation between overpopulation and poverty. In contrast, the invention of the birth control pill and other modern methods of contraception resulted in a dramatic decline in the number of children per household in all but the very poorest countries. Agriculture has sustained human population growth and has been the main driving factor behind it. With the more food supply, the population grows with it. This occurs most in regions which are fertile and capable of higher food production, in contrast to barren regions unable to support crop production or larger any scales at all. Humans have historically exploited the environment using the easiest, most accessible resources first. The richest farmland was plowed and the richest mineral ore mined first. Anne Gilrich and others note that overpopulation is demanding the use of ever more creative, expensive and environmentally destructive means in order to exploit ever more difficult to access and poorer quality natural resources to satisfy consumers. Like all other animal populations, human populations predictably grow and shrink according to their available food supply, growing during an abundance of food and shrinking in times of scarcity. The human population began increasing after the Neolithic Revolution and its increased food supply. This was subsequent to the Green Revolution, followed by even more severely accelerated population growth, which continues today. Peter Fogg has commented on the paradox that intensification of production to feed an increased population leads to a still greater increase in population. He also focused on the phenomenon which he calls a food race. Some developed countries have both a diminishing population and an abundant food supply. As a result, there is exploitation of the poor countries. Food products made from organic, also known as naturally grown millets and vegetables, is good, but nowadays everything is inorganic. Rampant usage of artificial fertilizers, insecticides, genetically modified crops has caused extensive damage to our health. Business communities are gaining at the cost of ruining the common man's health. Fights, disputes have become very common for water between neighboring states in India. Similarly, there are fights, wars between countries for possession of natural resources like water, land, etc. Such internal disputes within the country will be curtailed if the governments establish a common grid for water and mandate plans for distribution to the states based on population like electricity distribution. Poor man suffers for want of affordable edible quality water, whereas companies pay very little amount for the same and consuming such high quantity. Besides, rampant contamination of river streams by companies by letting off untreated effluents, especially by dyeing units, leather tanneries and chemical industries. There should be very heavy penalty for the perpetrators and it should be strictly enforced. Hit them right in the eye. Have clear-cut plans to curtail the population growth as recommended. Share the natural resources evenly between nations. Remove barriers and impediments. Curtail deforestation and instigate reforestation. Thereby curtail man-animal conflict. Environmental degradation like global warming, spread of zoonotic diseases, pandemics, epidemics, flooding and other natural disasters, etc. Increase forest, green area, mitigate the effects of wildfires, adapt intensive farming measures, etc. Some of the statements views expressed are solely mine based on limited knowledge gained over 6 decades. Debates on topics like this can go on forever. Anyhow, let me call it a day. We'll meet again real soon. Always watch these videos with the closed captions, subtitles for 100% absolute comprehension as per my sincere recommendation zillion times so far. I know I rushed through to complete the presentation within 20 minutes max. This is a time limit. I had set myself to retain the viewers' attention as a norm. I know nowadays I exceed this time limit since I make honest attempts to cover the selected topics more elaborately, including so many intricate fine details referring a wide variety of sources, in particular Wikipedia quite extensively besides articles and books published recently. In addition, I add my own salt and pepper and masala based on my personal experiences so far in my life and also intuition. Stay at home as much as possible to maintain social distancing, attributed to pandemic novel COVID-19 and prolong your lifespan, lead a healthy life. God alone can put a stop to natural and unnatural events like maybe bio-war, cyber-war events like pandemics that may lead to apocalypse and extinction of all sentient species on Earth for no fault of theirs. All the best, wrestling, peace and harmony.